And hello, everyone, and welcome back to part 3 of our learning journey. Today's session is about enabling innovation with application security. So once again, my name is Shawn Kelly, and I'm one of the application security executives here at GitHub, and I'm your host for the day. I'm dialing in from Boston, so let us know where you're dialing in from in the chat. We had a little bit of a change today. Kevin Allwell is actually out on paternity leave. Congratulations again, Kevin. So Andrew Moose McCoy will be leading today's session. Say hello, Moose.
Hello, Moose.
How are you?
Good, man. It's good to be back. We got some the technical difficulties we're live, and it's good to be back and here to chat about some securing your supply chain with us today and how that helps enabling your innovation.
That's right. We did have a little bit of a glitch in the matrix last week. I do apologize for that, but it looks like things are going well today. So yeah, for a quick recap, in our first session, we talked about why are we still shipping applications with security issues. And then in our second session, we talked about improving application security with an end-to-end approach. We had a ton of participation, and we're hoping for the same today. I'm looking at some of the names here, and it looks like we've got some of the same people that have joined this week as well. So welcome back, everyone. And if it's your first one, the previous recordings are available on LinkedIn, and we can follow with links to those as well. So yeah, I mean, with that being said, Moose, I am going to let you take control here, and I'm going to sit back.
Awesome. Thanks, Shawn. So yeah, as we do it every week, please throw any questions you might have. Shawn's going to be keeping an eye on the chat and will interrupt me as we do to kind of have a lively discussion around today's topic. So one of the things that I want to chat with everyone today about is something that if you've chatted with me offline of these things, you know it's something kind of definitely I've been involved with for a while, and that's really supply chains. It's something, that's really impacting us, continuing going on almost 2 years, year and a half, 18 months of the pandemic. And, things, if you're looking to get a new car or even a used car, things are being held up by the chip shortage. I mean, Shawn, I think that impacted you. Any update on your end there?
So it did actually impact me. It was pretty crazy. So I went to go buy a new car, and I ordered the car. It was supposed to take 4 weeks for the car to come, and it is now 10 weeks in, and it's due to the chip shortage.
It's insane. Golf clubs I ordered Memorial Day weekend. I got one club, a couple more on the way, so I should have them in a month or so. But it's something that really impacts a lot of us. And one of the things that I like to highlight here. In talking about, some of the GitHub customers here, these are companies, if you go to our customer stories page, where they talk about what they've done with GitHub to enable the innovation across their organizations. And really, if you think about them, Home Depot, if you've done any kind of projects in the last year during COVID or even summer, I've done a couple projects around my house, and now I contract everything out, not as handy as I used to be. But really, the price of lumber, I think my neighbor was telling me the other day, is down to like $5. But a month or two ago, was still like $10 for a 2x4. That's hitting, the construction costs. When you look at Ahold grocery stores, here in the Northeast, Shawn, that's the company for Stop and Shop. So really, grocery stores, Shaw's, for us here in the North, I'm in Connecticut, for those that don't know. So go Red Sox. See how that season ends here. But really the supply chain of making sure the produce is always there, sourcing things from, to the Northeast in the winter when bananas and fresh fruit those really aren't in season up here. But being able to go to the store and have those fresh. And then 3M really played a crucial role over the last few years during the pandemic in personal protective equipment and across the myriad of other things they use. I mean, if you look around your office, you probably have some tape or something from them at some point. So really, when you think about it, these are companies that have physical supply chains that have really been innovating with their ability to do software. I used to work at Home Depot at the service desk years ago, and Now they have a really slick, much better user interface. When I was at the services desk, we'd have a Java command line terminal. I'd fly through it because I'm good with a keyboard, but even looking in the last decade, the innovation that they've been able to make on the software side is remarkable. But one of the big patterns here in being able to continue that innovation in a secure manner is recognizing what are you doing for your software supply chain as well. And one of the things I like to talk about is really industrial recalls. In software, we're not creating new processes. Agile and waterfall software development came from other engineering practices. So really taking a step back from what we're doing in building software and how has other industries and how have other places solved this. Industrial recalls is a really key one for me, thinking about, key marks in our history timeline around events where companies handled things in a manner that allowed them to concisely get the information out, pull things off the shelf, and or get information to the owners into the owner's hands so they can get their vehicles or things fixed safely. Or even in the case of the beanbag chairs, the one I was doing research on this one. There was a recall because there was a zipper, so you could refill your beanbags. Well, that presented obvious hazards for children opening it up and things along those lines. So if you buy a beanbag chair now, there's no zipper on it. So that's innovation in that just kind of sector to around a product safety thing. And so these are areas where, if you think about even on faulty airbags or different pieces of vehicles or mechanical equipment, being able to trace the serial number of where you source that part from and which vehicles it was put into the identification number is very akin to I'm using version 123 of Jackson Databind or other open source projects that you're building your code on. And that really ties into every, modern software development that to enable that innovation, to enable these organizations to shift and adopt software development and hire the talent they need to. You got to acknowledge that 80-90% of these the applications, as we know, are built on open source. And it's, these are the typical statistics that Shawn and I talk about with our customers on a day-in-day basis. I mean, it's 100 times more expensive to remediate vulnerabilities in production than at the build. And with looking at, enabling these types of best practices, giving your developers the best ability to choose components and automating their ability to keep those components fresh and vibrant is going to be a key to allowing them to do what you incentivize your developers to do. Be creative, bring that value to your organization. So I'm going to pause here. So as we're talking about supply, I can't talk today, excuse me. Decent amount about supply chains in general. So we've had, the industrial recall side. What are some of the compelling events that have affected supply chains, software supply chains in recent history for folks? And Shawn, I do not have the chat up, so if you can keep an eye on that for me.
Yes, sure.
I gotta make sure I sit up if my friend Dave Ide's watching. Doesn't like it when you sit back. All right, cool, thanks. Got a few folks behind the scenes here.
Yep, I'm looking for.
What about you, Shawn? Can you think of any compelling software supply chain events?
I guess that really depends, right? A perfect example is, even going back to, the chip shortage, right? Part of that's due to shortages within, the supply chain as well. So there's a plethora of them. And trying to think of any specifics. Like I said, the chip shortage was definitely one, because there was also a shortage on the software side as well. So, or was affected, not shortage, but due to the shortage, that supply chain was affected as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, they couldn't get they need chips to do the testing in order to make sure that they're going to be. They can't just, hey, we're going to put this out there. They have to go through their own QA cycle for those as well. So,
right.
Awesome. All right, so
I was looking at one.
See any of these in the chat?
Mentioned the pipeline hack, Moose.
Yep, that's a classic one of. I don't know if the reports come out on that one yet, so I can't really speculate, but typically those. Whoa. Fingers on the mouse there. A lot of times those things end up, whether it's Equifax. We can always talk about that one where they using certain open source packages can leave a it's like leaving your front door open. I live in an area where maybe it's okay to do that, but we've had break-ins recently, so you heighten up your security. And so the same thing should be said around using open source, especially in this day and age. It's a good practice to keep your doors locked. But in this day and age, when you don't want to leave yourself as a target of opportunity, you really need to be applying some of the best practices out there. And the reason I actually chose that Sony email hack one on here too, is it's interesting because that was, if you look back at kind of the after action of the event, it was a targeted attack on that company for potential explicit reasons due, I think it was the movie The Interview. Funny movie, but it ended up causing grief, and so they got in there and they released a bunch of emails to cause PR on the company, more or less. There was no real, maybe they lost some financial stuff, but that really was that targeted campaign. When you look at Equifax, maybe they were targeted. Maybe they were a target of someone running, people running a script and saying, hey, we found this front door. Maybe they found 10 other front doors that we never found out about. Things like LeftPad are an interesting piece of the supply chain. It wasn't a supply chain attack, more of a supply chain disruption, if you will, due to legal ramifications due to the naming of a package, KIK, conflicted with the messaging app. There was like a DMCA and takedown and name conflicts, and so the owner of the package just delisted it from NPM, and people that didn't have that 9 lines of code to add some spacing in your JavaScript had their builds break because they didn't have that code cached and they were pulling it directly from the feed every time. So that's really when you think about having a caching mechanism in place for your code, like a repository manager, Azure Artifacts, something along those lines that really provides you that backup copy in case the real one's not there. Let's see. The dependency confusion's the most recent one that really shined a light onto the transitive dependency piece. Someone discovered an attack vector and then seeded it with some information and then wanted to see how far it would go and then notified the individuals once it was there. So it was a kind of ethical disclosure as part of the information, but if that person had been much more malicious, that could have gone much more differently. Any questions or comments in the chat around that before I move on?
As I always think about everyone talks about the Equifax breach, and every time I think about it, it's just it was such a simple fix, but this is where securing that the supply chain comes into place. I mean, you have to look at the source code that you're developing yourself, but you have to also keep an eye on that supply chain and any applications that come in through that. I always think about that when I think about the the Equifax breach, and amongst others as well, but that's definitely the big one. I'm surprised we didn't have Target on here.
Yeah, I don't really, I try and not. I choose kind of the stories I choose carefully because you can really, whether it's them, there's a lot of companies that have gone through kind of those types of data breaches.
Yeah.
And really, you could probably put a lot of different names up here. As part of it. And I don't even know if we end up knowing kind of the after action on some of them. But for folks that do want to read more, one of the sources that I read a lot is the Verizon breach report. Not about Verizon's breaches, but they do an analysis on the industry and where things are coming from and different attack vectors based on different information in the community. So I would recommend that one for folks who want to read more.
Yeah, and going back to the names, I mean, we all know who the companies were, right? But the cool part about that is a lot of the companies that did have these types of breaches over the years, they have actually done a very good job at basically explaining what happened, but it's also explaining what they did, as far as precautions to make sure that these things don't happen again. That's one of the reasons I think it's always good to, bring up those names, because you can always go back to them and, through various articles or whatever to see what they've done to, change things and just make it a lot harder, right? Because
absolutely.
It's not a matter of if you're going to have, some type of a data breach. It's a matter of when. And, from that, it's just a matter of also making sure that you are securing, all of those things, that you have to secure to make sure it doesn't happen. And the supply chain is always, really one of the biggest ones out there. So there's definitely a lot of articles on how those companies have prevented these types of things from happening again.
Yeah, no, and they definitely harden, and they also there's definitely conferences like DevOps Enterprise Summit and other security conferences where they get together and they share general ideas. So it's really not really making it a competitive advantage. It's really bolstering each other up. So really, because when you think about the downstream consumer is going to use multiple retailers or multiple services across the user spectrum. So as long as the end consumer has the most secure experience, I think we can all benefit. So one of the other questions I usually like to ask too is why folks believe a software supply chain is important to you or your company. Like I've definitely expounded and been chatting a lot about it, but just trying to understand why folks think where folks' heads are at with it as well.
Well, it's actually a good one here, Miss. Let's see.
Oh, I think I got some. Thank you.
From Amon, it looks like he, with the recent dependency confusion, makes me not even trust my computer. Composer JSON, but we probably gain more than we lose. So that's a pretty interesting statement right there from Amon.
That is actually a really great. Was reading coming up for some of the slides I have coming up. I didn't put it in there, but there was an interesting comment by an open source maintainer talking about, I'm not quite sure what other security tools do out there, but they're benefiting off of my labor here, so I fixed the issue, and so that's really kind of talking about that's such a great point. Thanks for calling that one out, because it really. A lot of companies get this impact of innovation and ability to deliver value downstream based on, like, even looking at Facebook, they maintain their open source projects that other companies are using as well, for the good of the community. Leave the job. I like that. Yeah, sysadmin. Yeah, because it's about runtime, but even automation that's interesting. Once you've deployed it too, though, is you really need to understand, let's just be honest, not everyone's deploying code to prod 10 times a day. Some folks are doing it once a week, once a month still. If not every, maybe even depending on your industry, you don't need to deploy it that frequently. So really you need to know kind of when things are going bad as well. So really it's a full analysis of your supply chain. So it is important to always be fixing it at that shift left. But when you just accepted a merge that's running in production for something vulnerable, you really want to have that PR trigger deploy to production. So maybe you're not deploying every commit, but once the Dependabot PRs get merged into production and trigger. So it's just an interesting food for thought for folks. Oops. Keep going off. So really, as we've been chatting about supply chain, I do want to talk kind of around where this provides existential problems, and why having open source, having good software supply chain is important for your for your SDLC and good just kind of innovation and application security practices. So really one of the big problems that's led to some of those incidences is, security is the fact that, you have transitive dependencies within your code. You might be using React Native or Jackson Data Bind or one of these other things, or maybe even the Struts framework, because it is a very well-maintained framework. You just need to be using the current versions of it. So if you're using one of these, you might also not have the knowledge of the 50 other components that it's bringing in. That's where it's using, things like they're built into GitHub, like a dependency graph, gives you that insight to know what's being brought in. As with most things in life, knowing is half the battle.
And Moose, I wanted to, before you go on, there was actually a pretty good question that was asked. Who all is involved in the entire software supply from vendor to user, right? So that's a great question. And, it's funny, I'm looking at Giovanni's, who made a statement right after that question was asked. And, he in the last part, he said, it's everyone's responsibility, right? Like it's everyone's responsibility. Number one, to protect the supply chain. But number two, when you ask who is all involved, it's actually everyone, right, from front to end. I mean, it's all customers, all employees, all vendors, of an organization. In some way or form, everyone is involved with the supply chain and sort of responsible for securing it as well.
Oh, absolutely. Because even that's within an organization, and you're just thinking of it we're also thinking of it from the vendor to company.
Yep.
What about the college kid that wrote that PR into some of the frameworks that are being brought in? Do you know all the information you're getting from the vendor software as far as their bill of materials and things along those lines? So there's a lot of things to even pull it even a deeper layer back.
Yep.
Than what we traditionally even think about, like even third-party data vendor management, where it's concerned about, what data the company uses. And we've all kind of talked about and gone through and lived those discussions as well. But really, it really is kind of that whole existential web of everything that's gone into it as well.
Yeah.
It could be tens of thousands of users and other people across the globe by the time you're done with it.
Yeah, and even like the next kind of answer to that question came from Michael, and his answer is kind of spot on, right? I think it's important to remember that the supply chain is affecting more than just our applications, right? But it's also the tooling that we use and so forth. So yeah, good feedback, everyone.
And it just kind of rings true to even, this is the Verizon data breach investigations report I was chatting about, and year over year, the flaws in applications are consistently the number one attack vector. So really just knowing's part of it, but also having a means to fix things in a timely manner. And one of the community things that we're working here at GitHub to bolster over time, as we've been a certified naming authority for the last year or two, is really fixing the security vulnerability disclosures and issues. I did a little bit of research over the weekend this morning, and here's just kind of a few snapshots from different projects across GitHub. And, these are older ones. Yep, these are all from 2020 or older. And these are really just discussions around, vulnerabilities or potential CVEs within the code. And really, none of these were super malicious in nature. But there have been ones in the past prior to us creating the security workflow. And what these discussions would be is like, hey, here's vulnerable code on how to do a remote code execution in this. And so someone would then be able to parse or look for that and pull that information in and then create an attack vector. And that's really not in the best interest of any consumer. And really one of the things we've been working to fix with the security workflow. Actually, I'm trying to pull up. Do we have any questions in there, Shawn?
Just the ones that we just did, and keep going.
Right. So one of the key pieces here is that's we got. Sorry, I keep changing my context here. And so really, as I mentioned, GitHub security advisories and using your Dependabot. If you're on GitHub, it's free in your public repositories. It's included with using GitHub is really one of the best ways to enable and have things automated in a way where it removes that developer thought. You don't need your developer spending half a day, hours, researching open source. Make it easy for them to be able to kind of ingest those PRs. And through the GitHub security advisories, for the entirety of 2020, this is some of the stats I worked with our team to get, is we published 520 CVEs. For 2021 so far, we have already published 771. So that between 2020 and 2021, we have published almost 1,291 CVEs. So that's really a tangible impact, and as you can see, growing year over year. And that's really where we want these discussions to happen, where natural open source contributions happen within the pull requests. But these security discussions need to happen in a private manner between the security researcher and the maintainers, so that they might take a week or 2 to 3 weeks to create and collaborate on a fix. Because it's important to disclose the CVE, but also have a fix or a path forward or remediation, things that the community can use, rather than just exploitable code that leaves you scrambling. And so that's really the methodology that we're taking here, is making sure the open source community has the tools they need to secure software. So when you think about what you can do with a GitHub public repository, you can use CodeQL. CodeQL is looking for your OWASP top 10 type things. It's looking for high level severity issues in your code, so that those open source projects are safe and maintained. And the community is looking towards that and beginning to adopt it as a standard. So as CVEs and, so as we're working towards, CVEs are getting published, the community is potentially looking at adopting writing queries for these as well. Additionally, if you look at the Dependabot results, you can see how much, you can see a plethora of information. So you're not just blindly accepting a pull request. So really giving you the ability, even through Dependabot version updates as well, to control the hose pressure, if you will. Do you want to have updates every week, every day, maybe monthly? What type of version updates do you want? Do you only want major, minor, or patch? And then allowing you to control the code binaries and packages. That's really through Dependabot and, dependency graph, being able to know what's coming into your repository there. And so the big piece I do want to highlight too is if you go to github.com/advisories, this is where you'll be able to see the advisory database, where we do publish back to, where they're being maintained there, but these are also publishing a CVE to the National Vulnerability Database. And one of the things the team's enhanced on the process over the last year or two is the ability to have security advisory credits. And so what these security advisory credits are is for college students, security researchers, open source security researchers, bug hunters, gives them a credit and tangible things to put on their CV as they're potentially looking for jobs or just building their portfolio of credits. Really great thing that continues to make it worthwhile for the community to continue using the tools that are out there. So we're coming in at about half past here, Shawn. Really just wanted to have a little chat with folks around the open source stuff, what we're doing here. If folks want, I can go through a light demo of Dependabot. If we want to see some security advisories, or if there's any other questions, I'm happy to chat with folks.
So, hey, Moose, can you go back a couple slides? There's that one graph. I did want to point something out. Go that one right there. So this is a very interesting graph. And we talk to this a lot when we, when we talk to our customers. And, so if you look at that blue line, that's basically that's the trend, right? For, source code, whether it's open source or in-house, that companies are using, right? So every year, companies develop more in more applications. And the bottom line, that purple line there, does show developer awareness, right, for understanding or getting to these various security vulnerabilities. But the red line is the most interesting one, right? Because that red one is, even though, if you look at the purple line, even though we are, attacking these, security issues more, the red line is showing that even more of them are being introduced on a regular basis, right? So it's very hard to keep up. So I like I really like to show that one. And a lot of that is within the supply chain. So it's a big challenge.
Oh, absolutely. It's not going away, but you can definitely, I did not put the graph in here, but we also have the graph of the Dependabot fixes, where it's I think 10 to 15% increase in the ability to accept a PR when it's automatically generated for a vulnerability.
Yeah.
So give folks a minute or two if there's questions or if folks want to see anything. Otherwise, we could wrap a little early if there's nothing out there.
So one person in the questions, Moose, asked if we could demo, if we did do a demo, can we demo packages and cover how it could be used to mitigate some of our supply chain risks.
So I can cover packages from a supply chain piece. Just give me 1 second to stop sharing here. Packages at this stage is really meant to give you an ability to host your binary packages, as well as Docker container, or excuse me, container registry, GitHub container registry. So really focusing on meeting the community's needs on hosting. So when I think of a package manager, I think of two things. So you have the proxy piece, which I mentioned before. That's where a lot of that supply chain risk is coming from, as well as the hosted side. So being able to host what you build and make it internally consumable. Packages is great and has that functionality on the hosted side. And the team's long-term ambitions are working on meeting that proxy side. Some of the stuff we are doing, though, with the migration of NPM internally in the NPM package registry, is we're bolstering their security around that publish process as well. We can look to see if there's a blog we've written about it, but I know that the team continues to invest in that area internally as a community service. Really, that was becoming one of the key attack vectors if you look at typo squatting and the different things. So there's lots of investment internally to protect the community around that. So let's see, I'm not sharing my screen, so let me pull up a good packages one.
There was a question that was asked, Moose, and says, will the scans flag transitive dependencies for security vulnerabilities?
Yes. So with Dependabot, the dependency graph will go ahead and, so yeah, with the dependency graph, you can see here that it builds out your direct and transitive dependencies here, and then you'll be able to see the vulnerabilities within this graph. This is the WebGoat project, so there is a ton in here to go through. But that's where now with on the security tab, you have the Dependabot alerts that are generating here. So you have the alert. Hey, here's the information of something that's potentially vulnerable. And then when you go into here, we can see that there's a pull request open for it. And then you have a bunch of information to make that informed decision about whether or not you want to accept this change. On the packages front, you can publish it's right here on the code tab on the right-hand side, right under releases. And so right here, you can choose your different registries that are available. So containers, Docker, Apache Maven, all the standard ones here. And so really that'll bring you to the documentation. Or if you're doing a GitHub action, you can create a new workflow here. And we have one here these are for my internal organization. These are for my repository, excuse me, as well as these are made by our internal organization, Octodemo here at GitHub. And there's going to be a deploy GitHub packages in here somewhere. Here you go. So this would be one that's going to go ahead and publish. Since this is WebGo, it's a Java project. So this would just do a Maven B package, and then we're going to do a Maven deploy, and then GitHub Workspace is where the settings XML is going to be for the configuration to deploy it up. And so this would be an internal. This is an internal repository, so this would be only available to those within my organization that had the permissions for it. Awesome, great questions. Anything else in there, Shawn? Let me check Slack on my side too.
Yep, I'm going back and forth. I've got two different windows open here. Can you use packages proxy side to block download and use? Okay. Can you use packages proxy side to block download and use of packages or versions which contain known malware?
Not intrinsically. There is an action I can share though. Let me pull it up here on my side. That will allow you to create a list. Let's see, so if I share my screen, another shout out to my coworker Geek Masher who created this. Sure. All right, so with this action, this is a GitHub action which leverages the code scanning, Dependabot, and secret scanning APIs. So what you actually could do is via the Dependabot functionality of this, create a allow deny list of components that you would or would not want in your build. And from there, you can actually have it fail a GitHub action. So if you insert this as part of, let's say, a build check before you actually finally package and publish your build to packages or artifacts or something like that, you can run this and then break that process. Further, that type of functionality intrinsically through the proxy would be something that our team is investing in from a long-term perspective, but nothing on the immediate that I can talk about. But I highly encourage those that have not seen this, that are using GitHub code scanning potentially in a public repository or for within your orgs to use this. You can set up ways to have your Dependabot time to remediate. So giving folks, give them a week, 30 days, and 90 days for all the low ones, as well as 7 days for any critical or high level code scanning alerts. And this is, so what it supports from how would you do that and now allow deny list? That's probably one of the questions folks are thinking about, is you'd want to really look at this dependency type of squatting. If you have known malware, known malicious packages, you can bring in this, do an import list. And we have one basically maintained here from sourcing things on the internet for folks. So you could add to this and then import that as part of your checks as well. And this is in the GitHub Marketplace. It's a open source GitHub action.
Does anyone have any other questions? I was looking through the chat. Doesn't look like any recent questions have come up. Do you guys have any other questions for us?
If not, it was great chat with folks. I think we'll have something else coming up in the next few months. I believe so, right, Shawn? We usually get.
We do, yep. So always, keep an eye, for upcoming events. And Moose, if you don't necessarily have to do it, but if you can pull that slide deck up and go back to that last page, there is
I think I can.
There is actually a QR code that you can scan, or you can follow that link. We're always looking to improve these, so any feedback would be deeply appreciated. And I think that there was also a link that was added to Goldcast as well as LinkedIn. So if you guys would like to go, into further detail on GitHub as well as GitHub Advanced Security, please feel free to reach out to us. We'd love to talk with you. And what we'll do is we will leave this link up. And once again, everyone, thanks for joining us in this 3-part series. As I mentioned before, you can you can go to github.com or go over to LinkedIn, and you can find links to the previous sessions, as well as other sessions that we've had in the past. So once again, thank you again, everyone, and have a great rest of your week.